All right.
So hello everyone. Welcome to the fourth annual Buttedahl Memorial Lecture. Sort of annual. Missed you here. So I'm Sean. I'm a chapter member here in the Department of Education, Statistics, Adult Learning and Education program. And I want to welcome you to UBC and which exists on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam peoples. And we are visitors, and we're grateful for their generosity. So Friday night, I know you'd be out downtown clubbing, so Rajesh was noticing when he's over at staying in the West Coast Suite, there was an exodus of clearly young people parties from the residences there. So before I move into it a little bit further, I want to, of course, this is the Buttedahl lecture, and there is Buttedahl there. Photos there. We've got some more memorabilia at the back of the room. And I would like to start by honoring the Buttedahl family members. We have quite a few here, so could you just stand and see who you are? Thank you very much.
That's a lot of support. Yeah.
And we also make this an event for our alumni. So hands waving for people who are alumni. We're actually looking pretty good, given. So let me just begin with a little bit of background, and I'm not going to do justice to the adults, to Knute. So Paz was a professor in our program in the 80s, and also again back in the 90s. And she was from Chile, born in Chile, and an exuberant enthusiast for adult education. She also worked with Paulo Freire. She indeed brought Paulo here in 1984. Paz was my first professor of adult education. She served repeatedly when I did a diploma course. And then my first professor in my master's program was Paulo Freire.
Yes.
She got her doctorate in adult education at Florida State University, where she met Knute Buttedahl from British Columbia. And there's lots of good stories to tell about that. Me too. They came to Canada, and they actually worked with Roby Kidd. And Rajesh was just telling me about how he connected strong with Paz and Knute, and Paz in particular, Roby Kidd. Roby Kidd is infamous and famous. Yes. He was the first president of the Canadian Association for Adult Education, and really moved that organization to be a very major kind of civil society organization. It was very involved with initiatives, including the CDC around citizenship and education. Both Paz and Knute, I won't say all of the history about their various kinds of work. I was telling Rajesh earlier today that they were both rather peripatetic. They were all over the world. And Margaret was often with Paz, trying to keep her organized. And they were always passionate about international development and human rights. And Paz indeed set up a program, let's see if I can get this right, human rights and international peace and human rights at the Royal Roads University. So Paz and Knute have since left us, and in honor of the incredible legacy they've left with us, we began to raise funds for the Buttedahl Memorial lecture. And the theme of all of those lectures has been peace, human security, and human rights, which of course is in the spirit of Paz and Knute very much. So I hope you're listening in. So in the spirit of fundraising There are some cards at the back of the table, and we would love it if you would actually donated something to the Buttedahl Memorial Lecture Fund. You'll get a tax credit, so we can continue on with these lectures forever. That would be great. Before I introduce Rajesh, I wanted to thank a few people who made this event possible, and I'll probably miss a few. First, Jeannie. Jeannie is kind of our alumni. She is actually the queen of our adult education. And I don't think many of these events would happen without Jeannie, who kind of did it all. She contacted you, she ordered the food, she organized the volunteers. I think I saw her even moving chairs over here earlier today, room bookings, et cetera, et cetera. I want to thank Rowena Backus, who also assisted with this organizing, got the word out broadly to the campus and beyond. Adrian helped create a nice flyer. James Boucher, thank you, James, for carting chairs over from the big house, as we call it. And I should acknowledge our dean. Oh my God, his name just escaped me. Lloyd Frank. Thank you, Clyde, for coming. Okay, I'll talk later. And then a whole bunch of people volunteered, including Maria Beck, Melissa Friesen, Jay Penner, Mark Legacy, Issa Yoon, Dwayne Cover, Alison Young, Dr. Jan Jun, and Yodi Wang. Have I missed anybody? Now, I'll turn it to an introduction to Dr. Rajesh Tandon. And probably, if you were looking at the flyer, heard a little, or understood a little bit about him. Many of you might have met Rajesh in the past while. He was here in the mid-90s at UBC for a little bit. He is co-director of the UNESCO Chair on Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education. He co-chairs that with Buttedahl, many of you know, over at the University of Victoria. Quite an interesting initiative on many levels. And he is also the co-editor of the forthcoming GUNI report, GUNI Global University Network for Innovation, on engagement, knowledge, and higher education, rethinking social responsibility. He is co-founder and president of the Society for Participatory Research in Asia, known as PRIA, world renowned in the adult education field, and I'm sure beyond, particularly in New Delhi. So for 30 years under his leadership, PRIA has been working towards the empowerment of the poor and the marginalized, such that they can collectively claim their rights and organize for self-reliant development. And he is a pioneer in innovative methodologies, participatory research, participatory planning, monitoring, and evaluation. So today is International Women's Day, and I invited Rajesh. We knew he was going to be in this part of the world to come and see us, and thought that, can he say a few things about International Women's Day? And indeed he can. So that's what he's going to speak about today, things that we can learn about democracy and citizenship, etc. So our plan is he'll talk for about 30, 40 minutes. We'll have time, about 15 minutes or so, for questions and comments. And then we'll have some food, like real food. And we'll have a complimentary bar. So I should say just a couple of housekeeping items. The washrooms are sort of, you have to go through the doors. They look like fire doors. And the men just have to keep going.
Outside, find a bush.
So, welcome everyone, in particular Dr. Tandon as our keynote lecturer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shauna. And thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you this evening. First of all, great to have this conversation on the occasion of March 8th, International Women's Day. One of the few occasions when we can celebrate progress on some aspects of our societies. I want to invite you for a conversation this evening, even though it is said that I'm going to give some sort of a keynote. But I suspect that everybody in the room has several keys and they have done noteworthy work on it. I have chosen to focus on learning democracy in everyday life and relating it to some reflections on International Women's Day, but I invite you to having this conversation on what are the challenges of learning democracy in everyday life today. It's an honor to be here on the occasion of Buttedahl Memorial Lecture. It has to be construed as a memorial lecture as opposed to a memorial conversation. I knew as in several ways, on several occasions. I first met her in Sweden in 1979. Although at the time when International Council for Adult Education was doing something with its triannual kind of a conference. And of course, I had met Rovi Kid before, and through Rovi I got to know a bit of her. I don't think I knew Knute too much. Then I got to meet her again when in Paris, the Adult Education Conference had prepared and adopted Right to Learn Declaration. And subsequently, when she was launching this program on human rights, global human rights education program, then in between she went to IDRC, and that's when we did not have an ongoing. And when you see this picture, and many of you belong to that family, one word that stays in my memory about ours is passion. Passion. And sometimes when you are passionate, you can ruffle some feathers. Not because you intend to hurt anybody, but because you are so passionate about a cause, about a commitment, about a set of ideals that you want to try and realize in your lifetime. And recalling that passion this evening is important because somewhere in the journey we are losing that sense of passion. We are living in times when there are more societies and more countries around the world which have willy-nilly adopted democracy as a form of political governance. There are more democratic governments today than there were at any time in human history. But my suggestion to you is that as citizens, we have lost our passion for democracy. And if anything, democracy is at risk. Democracy is at risk because the institutions of democracy, the formal institutions of democracy, are failing to make lives of all citizens better. And the leaders of formal institutions of democracy around the world are no longer being trusted by citizens. So today, if you take any of these global polls that are done, Gallup polls, or this poll or that poll, we all find that the leaders we elect as voters to our democratic institutions in parliaments, in provincial or local governments, in municipalities, or in federal, national parliaments, and the leaders who become ministers and prime ministers and presidents or whatever else they become. We elect them, but we don't trust them. And today, if you look at the younger generation, if you look at the part of the world I live in and work, vast majority of people are below 25 years of age. Their sense of respect for leaders in democratic institutions is even lower. So we are facing a paradox. We're facing a paradox that more and more countries, more and more societies have adopted formal institutions of democracy. And yet more and more people are losing faith. And I suspect that this is happening partly because we have lost passion for democracy. We have become voters for democracy, but not passionate practitioners of democracy in everyday life. No. When we look for democratic practice in everyday life, what do we look for? What do we mean by democratic practice in everyday life? Let me give you a couple of examples, 2-3 examples from my own recent experience. In our context, last 7-8 years, there has been growing sort of tendency to ask, where do you belong? And the intention is to ask which ethnicity, which religious group, which linguistic formation you belong to. And about 5 years ago, one day my daughter came home from high school and asked me the same question. Dad, where do I belong? I don't belong to us, you belong to India, you belong. What's the question? And she said, no, there was a question that was posed in the classroom. What is your religion? So I said, what did you answer? She said, I answered that my religion is Hinduism and Christianity. And the teacher said, no, that is not possible. So I said, why did you say so? She said, yeah, because my dad is Hindu, my mother is Christian. So my religion is Christianity, Hinduism and Christianity. But the teacher was looking for a singular answer. Teacher, most kids raise their hands, a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, whatever. So she was an oddball. And it took us a while to figure out how disturbing this was for her. And we went to meet the principal later on because we were also somewhat agitated. What kind of question was this, and why wasn't she properly acknowledged? And of course the principal said, there is some exercise that educational administration from Delhi has asked us to do, a bureaucratic some sort of approach. It took us a while to support a notion that our children could have hybrid identity, and that hybrid identity was as okay as the pure type, whatever that means. Last year, we were working in a part of India on issues of violence against Dalit scheduled caste communities who have been historically socially excluded and oppressed. And these girls are, adolescent girls, are studying in school. And because violence was endemic, our intervention was to enable them to, number one, understand what rights they could claim, but also what channels they could use to deal with this problem. And as we began to work with them, we realized that there was a vicious circle of violence. That whenever Dalit girls faced violence from upper caste communities, the boys in Dalit communities would go out and repeat acts of violence on the other girls, and therefore would start and reinforce a very vicious circle of physical violence. And obviously, might is right, variety of dynamics will take place, those with more muscle power and more political connections and more wealth would ultimately oppress those people. We began to ask the boys, what will it take for you to not get into this vicious circle? What will it take for you to utilize those mechanisms which will empower you and girls in your community to resist it, but not to perpetuate it? The conversation with the boys was far more difficult than with the girls and their mothers, because the mothers knew that if you fall into the trap of vicious, violent circle, you won't win. But the boys were unable to grasp. And the point that they were making was that if we are hurt, if our families, if our sisters are hurt, then we have the right to hurt others. If you think of that and you say, well, is this a society which works on principles of equity and democracy and justice, or is it tit for tat? Let's all raise our hands to beat each other up. In both these stories, the question is not whether individual action is solving or in some way improving the situation, solving the problem, improving the situation. But how can basic principles of democratic practice be learned and utilized? We have learned to be a voter, but we have not learned to be a respectful citizen. We have defined our identity more in relation to the state, the government, which apparently gives us or confers on us our citizenship in a narrow legalistic sense. But we haven't defined ourselves in relation to others horizontally and our obligations to others. In my view, if you look at the way women organize themselves, if you look at the way women have organized themselves to resist injustices, then there are many lessons we can learn about democracy in everyday life. Many years ago, I heard about Mother's Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires. And some years ago, very recently, somebody from Argentina told me that they are still doing on. And that they gather there in midday, and some of them have brought their daughters of 25 years, 1985, 30 years. Now, without perhaps anybody taking the experience of Buenos Aires, there are two other sites where in last 3 years I came to know similar expression by mothers. One was in Kabul. In Afghanistan, because of all the violence that has taken place, a lot of young boys are missing. And I came to know that a group of mothers, every day, some fully burqa clad, assemble for half an hour with photographs of the boys and men in their lives missing. And this third place that I heard about this was in Indonesia. That there is a similar practice, a group of women who are mothers claiming their right to meet their loved ones, their sons, or brothers, or husbands who are missing. Now, at some level I may get very angry given the sort of the activism in me and say, why the hell this problem hasn't been solved for 30 years? Why the mothers are still at it? But at some other level, those mothers are making a more fundamental point by gathering every day together. They are reminding not just political authorities and security agencies or elected officials, they're reminding citizens of those locations that the manner in which violence is perpetrated, the manner in which discrimination is taking place, the manner in which people are missing, that manner hasn't stopped. They know at the bottom of their heart that their loved ones are not going to come back. They know they're gone. You can say, I can say, oh, that's stupid. How long can you walk around? You're not going to get your sons and husbands and brothers back. But they are doing it not because they want, they know, They expect somehow miracles to happen. But they're making a point that it's a process by which disappearance is happening, is still prevalent in society, and that needs to stop. I came across in our work in India very recently a elected local government leader, woman leader, in her 40s or so, who was very successful in mobilizing her community and making improvements in issues like attendance in school, or cleanliness of drains and sanitation, etc. And had been recognized by many others. Because she was so successful, her community asked her to contest again. And she contested again and won. They were behind her. So when I met her, she had just started her second term. The first 5 years, second term. I said, how are you doing? And a small chat over a cup of tea. And she said, look, I face one problem. I immediately said, from your husband. Well, that was my mindset. She said, no, he's not a problem. She called him, he also came, joined the conversation. For the farmer. She said, the problem I face is from other elder men in the society. So I said, why? They came to you and you got elected again, what's the problem? No, there's a social problem. They sit around and say, there's something wrong with this woman's husband. That's why she is contesting with me. So he's the oddball. Problem with him. And she said, I don't like that at all. I don't know what to do with it. And she said, it hurts me to hear these kinds of rumblings. Because in reality, my husband is very supportive. Otherwise, I wouldn't have performed so well in the first term. I wouldn't have agreed to contest the second term. But in the eyes of those other elderly men, there was something wrong with this man to allow his wife to do all this public work, public service in community, unlike them. So she was in a way defending good men. She wasn't championing strong women. She was defending a few good men. A few good men, I think. And I returned from that conversation, I was thinking about it. With all the constraints of mobility, social mobility, small, weak sort of economic base, limited access to functional literacy. This woman is doing so well, is accepted, and is championing the cause of a few good men. And that's what was something she wanted to talk to me about. It wasn't about cleaning drains and getting kids in school, that she had already achieved. And I came back and I talked to my colleagues and said, how many times we support those who apparently come from our enemy's camp? Because, as you know, there was a time in many societies where many women's movements, women's groups targeted many more men. That somehow they were directly, personally responsible for the poor, weak, oppressed status of women. But here is a woman who identifies good men and champions their cause. And to think of that as a learning democracy in everyday life is to identify ways by which we express solidarity with those who are different from us, who are dissimilar to us, who are not our types. Because we have learned how to show solidarity with those who are our types. Once we know, the ones who talk, walk, dress like us. Therefore, in thinking about democratic practice in everyday life, coming to terms with differences is not an easy thing to do. It's much easier to say, I can stand here and say. But differences are real, differences are universal. And learning to tolerate, if not respect is sometimes a tolerable, but even if you tolerate or live with differences, is perhaps the most significant part of democratic practice in everyday life. It is kind of learning that is lifelong in some ways. It's kind of learning that you don't complete by going to school or gaining adulthood. It's a kind of learning that continues to happen when we are confronted with a situation where differences trouble us, differences somehow hook a part of our identity and make us uncomfortable. In that sense, I would like to think that one of the sort of very interesting challenge that women have posed through all their struggles in society, not just to men, but in society, is how we can be different and equal. Because somehow the two don't seem to sit together. Similar and equal is more common in our comprehension than different and equal. And that's the turmoil that we experience in finding ways by which we can treat others who are different in a sense of equality. As a democratic form of governance, established constitutions are written, piece of paper, everybody sees. But in everyday practice, that piece of paper is not what you carry in your pocket. Everyday practice, it's who we are and how we relate to others, is what determines how we practice democracy. There is one other principle that women's movement threw up, which I think can offer some food for our efforts, some nutrition for our efforts to practice different and equal. And that has to do with the use of the personal. Of course, the slogan was personal is political. But many people may treat personal as political as if political with a capital P, they're going to do some big politics. But I understand from that is political with a small p, which is basically political in terms of relations of power. So if you want to change relations of power, you are acting politically. If you want to join NDP, then you're acting capital P. Elections in a few weeks.
Maybe, we're hoping.
Now, personal is political means that I am part of my personal experience, my personal disposition, my personal life is part of that equation of power. I am sometimes relating to others from a position of powerlessness, and I am sometimes relating to others from a position of powerfulness. And a number of women I know in my life, in my personal, professional life, had enormous influence on me, on the way I perceive the world out there, without ever saying that they are going to influence me. None of them said, I am here to influence you. My dad always said, I'm here to teach you. Okay. As soon as he tried to teach me, I tried to resist his teachings. And there were others, professors. And that principle of personal is political. I think it was so natural for women, in my view, that they would use their personal experience as a basis of discussing relations of power and attempting to change them. And once I made the most foolish comment when I realized this, a couple of my very close women colleagues, that, gee, that is experiential learning. And they got furious. They got nothing to do with experiential learning. I thought I got the aha connection in my head. I was sort of grown up in the tradition of experiential learning and all that, so I said, now I got it, the link. And I opened my mouth and said so. He said, no, this is not experiential learning. And I realized what was later on, because all this wisdom arrives later. As a hindsight. So that they were not challenging the link I was establishing, but they were challenging my effort to label their initiative. And I kept on asking myself, what is it in my education, in my practice, in my behavior, that I want to stick one of these things on them? What is it? And they resisted. And I learned a lesson that day. First of all, not to stick unnecessary frameworks here and there. But more importantly, that a sort of fundamental premise of democratic practice in everyday life is to be able to to listen without necessarily making a plan of action. That listening per se is okay. Doesn't mean listening implies agreement, no. Listening does not require immediate response, no. And listening can be a basis of accepting the difference. So one of the most respectful things I learned for myself I can do is to listen. And if I do want to draw any conclusions, to draw them on my notepad. And don't show it. Later on I thought that how little we listen. And somehow the formal democratic system demands of citizens to speak, vote, claim, but not listen. And I think one of the ways in which we can learn, at least I have learned to practice what I think is listening, is the only way I can respect different points of view. So, on this occasion, on the occasion of International Women's Day, on the occasion of recalling the contributions of Knute and Paz, it's perhaps important for us, all of us, many of us, to regain our passion for democracy. Because if we lose that passion, we will remain mere voters, but we may not be practitioners of democracy in everyday life. And as educators, as adult educators, as practitioners, activists, and serious citizens, I think we all can contribute to more and deeper democratic practice in everyday life by regaining and restating our own passion for democracy. Thank you, Paz. Thank you, Knute. Thank you.
You mentioned Paz's passion, because Paz was such a passionate person, and I had a mother who was also Chilean and also passionate, and I want to be specific about their passion, because passion is not the most Canadian of adjectives. Passion is often the result of too much caffeine, but in Paz's case, it was so real. And the women that you mentioned that were passionate were all in extreme pain. So I just want to rule those out in this case. The women of the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires, the women of Indonesia, and women in Kabul were all women in extreme pain. So to mention them and only them when it came to dynamics, I want to branch out and mention Paz. Her ability to absorb like a sponge theater and film and people's attitudes and the aesthetics of things and history and everything that she would absorb and then put it through her brain and share it in such an articulate and fun way. What she had is really what I think we can all aspire to in a certain way. And again, I could connect to this because I had a mother whose style was different, but whose passion and intelligence were the same thing. I thought they were two magnificent contributors in Canada in that way, and it's just a joy to be reminded of that on March 8th here at UBC. It's just that thing to absorb, put it in your own frame of mind and share it with pride and with PAS's #1 plus, which was genuinely wanting to share. There's wanting to say your word to step on everybody else who hasn't had quite your experience. And then there's sharing, just want to say, that's how I feel. How about you? And that was PAS. This is how I feel. How about you? A big salute.
I think that, for what you said, I think we have not lost, in my view, just our passion for democracy. I think we have to go a step further. So what we have lost is our passion for humanity. And I think that's a fundamental problem we have in society today, I think. I don't think because I'm getting old and over 30 years old now, I have the same passion and the same politics since I was 12 years old until 72 I have today. And these 60 years, to me, what I have learned in the last, from the 80s on, I think, we have changed so much collectively because we have lost the sense of humanity. We have become so individualistic. We just care about ourselves and we don't care about other people. And I call that the capacity to give. We have lost the capacity to give as humans. And to me, that's the essential point. We have to regain the capacity to give and understand other people, and then we can move forward. I know I will never see it. I have lost, in a sense, the illusion I had when I was 16 years old that we will build a better world. And I haven't lost completely my faith still, but I think it's very difficult because for the last 30 years we have been taught a very different way of thinking. And it's here. It's in what we teach at English University and at Royal Roads when I work with Buttedahl, in Chile where I came from originally. So it's very, I think it's very difficult to change. So that's basically what, in the summary, what my reflection about what you said.
So we'll take a few comments and then Rajesh. And so Roger in here.
I have a feeling that Paz is going to walk in at any minute, and her language will be much more colourful than ours. I can promise you. And Knute will be crawling after her with an empty wallet because she just spent $3,000 on a dress for this occasion. It's so important because Rajesh, she would be delighted to know that you're here tonight saying these things to us, and so would Knute, I promise you. They would be. But I just want to say to you, Rajesh, it is a thrill to have you here because in our Cooley Werner reading room, which the university has to find a way to look after better, we've got a lot of materials by you about participatory research. These were written in the late 1960s and early 70s. In a way, Rajesh is the author of this notion which dominated much of our research agenda throughout the 70s and into the 80s and found fertile soil in Canada because much of the same values were evident here, but for different reasons. The size of the country, the small isolated communities could not really look to Ottawa to get what they needed. They had to look into themselves and work together, maybe not in quite the same innovative way as, say, the Bombay street dwellers, who I understand were mostly women, who used participatory research, drawing their own history, mapping their communities and so on in order to improve the quality of their life. But this idea that you authored, and which Buttedahl and other Canadians picked up, was pretty damn utopian. In some ways it was congruent with the optimism and the anarchism of the 1960s. This idea that the solution to people's problems lay within themselves, and if they could just get together and share their experience and listen and have horizontal relationships that respected, well, that resisted the large P but respected the small p, political, then things would get better. And I suppose they did too. You and others have written up lots of case studies where this approach, what we would call community development probably in parts of Canada, worked well. But I tend to agree with Alejandro. Maybe our passion is still there or a bit blunt and muted around the edges, but the tools of oppression are so much more sophisticated now. We've got a Prime Minister who's not the slightest bit interested in what the community has to say, and in fact is hostile to evidence and the facts of situations that we find ourselves in. We have the most ideological government in the history of this country. They've got the one right way, and it's all about globalization and money. So could you, when you get a chance to talk, say something about the new context and what it means for these rather utopian, nice ideas that you have authored and have reinforced again tonight?
Maybe we'll take one more comment and turn it over. So, please.
At risk of the sin of relabeling, I just wanted to ask, when differences are identified in a community, could it be that instead of, we call creating conflict or way around conflict, would be looking to identify the social synergism and complementary?
So Rajesh, you might want to just repeat a bit of that. I'm not sure everyone heard that, but we'll.
No, just instead of the differences being identified for conflict, that be looking for the complementary differences for social synergy.
Well, these are important sort of points that different ones of you have made. There are different periods of history, some in our lifetime, some not, when we seem to think that the fundamental human connection, our concern for others is being regulated or put aside. But look, the kind of enthusiasm that champions of globalization had in 2008, they have lost a bit of that. Things aren't those that looking that rosy from their point of view. Last year, the World Economic Forum in Davos spent, they commissioned a report on future of civil society. And one of the conclusions they made was that civil society is the glue in society. And without it, society won't function, businesses won't function, etc. I was taken, surprised that Davos folks, they spend some $20,000 to get there. In addition to their private jets and everything else, those $10,000 champagne bottles, $20,000 is the entry fee to that. Go there and discuss future of civil society and reach this conclusion. They would have asked anyone of us. But what is this symptomatic of? It's symptomatic of the fact that the champions of globalization, the champions of industry, the champions of market is God philosophy, they are confused. They are not so sure that this is the path, because their own folks, as some of them say, have betrayed them. So remember those bankers who gave themselves bonuses and lost other people's money. Their money, they are the money. So I think that the phenomena that we are witnessing is a phenomena of certain uncertainty, where the level of global interconnectedness has increased, not only in economic terms, but also in cultural and ecological terms, much more in ecological terms. But our capacity to work in a globally democratic manner is way behind. So the only way we know how to work globally is to either go to Security Council or to bomb Iran. In between, we don't know what else to do. So I think that the issues related to solidarity, our passion for humanity, our collective concern for everybody's well-being is actually just around the corner. I am a great optimist, and I believe that what we saw happening in the late 90s and at the turn of the millennium and all this euphoria about market is God and globalization is the answer, etc. I think that's some more sobering experience has come around. The difficulty is that in the meanwhile, I think inequality has increased, and as a result, the impatience has increased, and there are many people who are unwilling to be as patient as their grandparents were, and therefore they want to improve their lives in their lifetime, the next 10 years, and so that's where they are finding, they're thinking of, or some of them are already using shortcuts and grabs and those kinds of things are happening. I think that we will witness a period going forward where our intellectual and political leaders both will be at a loss to decide what is a best form of governing societies. And the reason it is so is because we are searching for solutions in a very sort of a neighborhood sense. And when we have become so globally interconnected, our solutions cannot be in the neighborhood sense. So policy making at the provincial level or the municipality level or even at the level of national boundaries, independent of what is happening elsewhere, will not yield desired solutions. And that's the problematic, how else do we do it? That's all we know. We don't know how else to do it. I think that the sort of the lure of technology, all the good things that technology can bring is also slowing down. There is a recognition that virtual world cannot replace real world. Brilliant user of social media, but if you don't know how to talk to each other, then there's something amiss. And I think that realization is coming by. And so in the tradition I grew up in, we have a saying that the pendulum, once it swings, it goes from one extreme to another, and it takes quite some time before it settles in balance. And I think we are witnessing that huge swing of the pendulum at this moment. Important thing, Roger, is not to keep quiet. So your articulation of your concerns so passionately is, I think, what is important. we sometimes keep quiet. And that's when,
Not very often.
yeah, not you, sure.
John, can I ask a question? Or you'd like to ask it privately?
Please, please.
Do you think, from an Indian experience, do you think the culture of narcissism is a Western phenomenon? Do you think it's a technological thing that has that hit India in any way? I see it here. People don't go to the movies anymore. There's an article in the Globe or a movie about the very thing that people are making movies about themselves, and including and watching themselves and their friends, and narcissism seems to be rife. And I agree with Alejandro there that we're fragmented everywhere. The personality is fragmented, culture is fragmented, politics are fragmented. We can't. The only people I see doing any work anywhere, volunteer work at the Dunbar Community Center, are women. Men have dropped out in general, unless there's a few retirees around or whatever, but it's just amazing. I don't think Canada would work without women volunteering. We'd be sitting around in our narcissistic world contemplating, I'm not sure what. What about India?
Well, we have had those, if you see those pictures of those Taj Mahals and those big monuments, my God, they were narcissistic people. You don't build a Taj Mahal in honor of your wife. You are not narcissistic. Love of your wife was gone. You mobilized slaves all over the world and built that monument. Of course, beautiful. So we are a land of huge castles and big forts and all this symbol of self-importance. So I don't think we are any substantially superior. I think the difference is when we believe in our unending rationality. We believe that we can think our way through as opposed to live around. And that has forced us somehow to try to tame everybody else, tame the nature, tame animals, tame fellow human beings, because we want to control. Right? We become control freaks. I'm told that there are some people who have gadgets in their car. They press a button and steak is cooking at home. They think it is technology. I think it's an extreme control freak. So, in our rationality, we have fragmented ourselves. You are right. We have fragmented our mind from our body. We have fragmented our body from our spirits. We have fragmented our human existence from our surroundings. We have lost our ability to listen to birds singing, etc., etc. First of all, we have killed them forever. And secondly, we don't listen to them. We don't observe what's going on because we are so full of ourselves as human race. And that's why we are facing a sort of a proportional crisis that we have never faced. We are trying to live beyond our means. Not just in terms of credit card debt, that is anyway finishing us, but in terms of natural resources. Everybody flushes 10 times a day, useless flushing going on, and water is being wasted. We think we are ensuring cleanliness. We're running out of water. Canadians may be lucky. You guys will face 4th, 5th World War on water here. We are all coming for water here. I'm telling you, we don't have water. You guys have got water here. So, but this is, it's true with land. How many 500, 800 feet, how much more digging we are going to do for minerals? Very soon, the drill will pass through the earth on the other side. And what for? What for? Each one of us has got 8 pairs of shoes and 20 dresses. Some of the shirts are hanging in a cupboard which we don't even wear. And because, the number of shirts determine our economic status. We feel good about it. But we are living beyond our means. We are living beyond the capacity of our environment to sustain. And the solution we are trying is again through our rationality. We are now going for green technologies. So we can exploit the environment through green lens. Instead of saying, let's consume less. Let's have 5 shirts less. Why should a plate of food be served where people waste half of it? I can never finish the number of French fries I get. And I continue to ask them, give me less. But why? So, this is everyday practice. None of our leaders want to stand up and say, let us consume less. They want to say, I'll give you the new key for green technology. So now, a whole bunch of companies are making investment in green technology. But nobody is saying consume less. We cannot sustain this. And then we come and blame, those Chinese, now they all want Rolls Royce. Why shouldn't they have Rolls Royce? Why should they? They are also in the same race. So if everybody is driving a Rolls Royce, nobody will be able to drive anything because there will be traffic jam on the street here, right here. So you are right in that sense that it is the narcissism of human race. It's a collective narcissism. It's not cultural, some are more narcissistic than others. And it is arising out of our belief that we have solutions, that we have an intelligence and rationality which we can solve all our problems through that. And we are living beyond our collective needs. And this is going to, it's not just those small islands in the Pacific who will be submerged when the sea level goes up. It's going to affect all of us. And when the going is tough, that's when we become xenophobic, we become intolerant of differences, and we become undemocratic. So I support what you're saying, but I think we need to stand up and take a call that this is not going to go very far.
I'm going to stand up.
And take a call.
And just before we finish, and we can get on to some sustenance, I'd like to invite Dr. Rajesh Tandon, who's passionate about democratic engagement, to just say a few words of thanks, and we have a small thing for him.
It is a great honor to thank someone from my homeland, and this is the first time I've actually had somebody from my homeland in this university on this very important occasion. So thank you for being here. And this afternoon I shared with the group that was there that Dr. Rajesh Tandon's work, he talked a little bit about his journey and all the unlearning he had to do in terms of methodological approaches to his own work, and how that research led to the focus on community focused research, where issues of who owns the research, how the research is done, dissertation, and how my dissertation in about third year, which is towards end, fourth year is when I finished, completely took a different turn as a result of Dr. Tandon's work. And so the impact that your work has had around the world and through the diaspora is very significant. So I wanted to highlight that journey that you spoke about earlier today in terms of the accountability of the work that we do in academia, as well as the unlearning that has to take place when we are working in colonial institutions with some of the Eurocentric thinking that not all of us connect to. And I think in terms of the presentation now, the context is very specific. And I think that really the context you highlighted beautifully in both the stories that in all the stories that you shared with us earlier today and now, what really stands out for me is humility and care with which you listen to those who are marginalized and oppressed in order to learn and understand their stories, their needs, and directions in terms of the work that they and you need to do. And I know you talked about solidarity with the other, and we may look at this academically as somewhat problematic in terms of issues of power. How do we do that? It seems quite utopian, but as you pointed out, maybe some of your other ideas are also considered utopian. But I think coming from the location that I also come from in terms of being a racialized woman, in terms of someone connecting and trying to reconnect to my own Indigenous heritage, although it becomes quite problematic here, and having a mother who was forced to quit her education in grade 10. I think some of the stories that you speak about in that context are very significant, but the solidarity that you talk about is crucial. That this work cannot be done alone, despite the problems that exist in trying to work in solidarity. I think it's crucial that we do work in solidarity. And in fact, I think in my own work and my own struggles and resistance, and I think to many of the women I know, much of that work has been done in collaboration with other women as well as other peoples. And on behalf of my elders and my ancestors, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you again for being here. And it gives me great pleasure to have you as co-chair, and the story of the co-chair was shared with us as well. A very radical intervention, I think, in terms of the activism required to do that work with integrity. So thank you again.
Some very small gifts to thank you both rationality. Michael's new book, where are you? Unearthing Canada's Hidden Valley, Michael Welton, and some good chocolate. You can eat and read at the same time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll get you some French fries later.
And I have a small thing for Jeannie, but I'll let her continue finish her film. But please join us and thank Rajesh